you are never going to stand out on YouTube. That's a phrase that I'm sure a lot of creators say to themselves every day, or worse, believe. But what if I told you it is possible to stand out, even in an oversaturated environment? Don't be discouraged, because today we have a case study breaking down one of the most successful YouTube stories in the past couple years, Ryan Trahan. Here are some golden nuggets that even you can apply to your strategy.
Hey, welcome to the Video Creators Podcast presented by vidIQ. You know how you put a lot of time and energy into your YouTube channel for not nearly enough growth? Yep, we get it. We are here today to help you change that.
Hello, creators. How are you guys? It's so good to see you here again for another Video Creators Podcast episode like we do for you every Monday, brought to you by vidIQ. We're just hanging out, sharing more advanced growth tips and tactics, next level strategy, growing your business, helping you reach more people and change lives. Today, I'm hanging out with Sam and Blake, two of the YouTube strategists here on the team. Guys, this is a big episode. A very big episode, and the audience knows exactly what kind of a bromance Sam has with Ryan.
I was going to say, if you've listened to at least one of our podcasts before, it's probably come up. So I'm a little excited. I'm excited to talk about this today.
I literally wrote this with you in mind. I was like, this is something I'm making for Sam that kind of please him. Mind you, I like Ryan Trahan myself, quite a bit, but I was like, let's please Sam this time around.
I appreciate it.
I'm curious. I want the audience to bet on who is going to be the first one to get a picture with Ryan Trahan at Vid Summit. Sam or Blake?
It's on.
It's on. It's on. I love it. I feel like the audience kind of needs a little bit of context here on exactly how Ryan's journey has evolved over the years. Ryan is a small town boy and he was a college running athlete. His obsession with being the best runner influenced his content and perspective on the platform. He used his professional college athlete platform to promote his Neptune water bottle business on YouTube. So that makes me think of him as like a young entrepreneur, right, guys?
Right,
That's
yeah.
pretty much what he was at that point, yeah.
Yeah. He faced an issue, though, when his college gave him an ultimatum concerning his likeness and relation to the college on his channel. So he did what every young college person would probably do. He chose to drop out of college to pursue his full passion on YouTube with only 20,000 subscribers. That's quite an impressive leap of faith, right, guys?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I mean, the reason I love this story too, first of all, is to touch upon a bit of like he started to where he is now to where he started was very, very different. I mean, his first video I watched was the water bottle one, and it was just the importance of drinking water. And it's got a ton of views now, obviously, because it's Ryan, but
sure.
To showcase you can start anywhere and pivot and still succeed. And he was very much entrepreneurship mindset of like, he was obsessed with running. And same with YouTube. I think his mindset shifted to YouTube at that point. But at the beginning, he just wanted to be the best runner possible. And he poured his heart and soul into that time and time again, which is why his channel was so influenced that way. So it's when it came to the point where he was trying to use that, leverage of who he was to grow his channel, I think he saw this opportunity of like, I don't want to be controlled by somebody, but I believe in this platform. It's a big risk. I mean, 20,000 subscribers is still quite a bit for a lot of people, but to give up college at a young age like that and say, I'm going to make this work is a really big risk in itself. But inspiring, but yeah.
I love that he actually, and we see that with a lot of young creators who actually do quickly hit that 1 million mark. They go all in, and that's not an easy thing for a lot of people to do. So that's not really one of those lessons today. But I think it's important context to see for you to hear. He's not just a YouTuber that just tries one things and gets a hit. This took a little bit of time. All right. There was, however, an accelerated growth that did happen for him. Ryan, when he did take that leap, he had 20,000 subscribers. 1 year later, though, he actually worked really hard and made it to 1 million subscribers on his channel. The views, the subscribers, the money, they were flooding in with all the success that he was having. His content was focused on reaction videos mostly during this period, focused on gaining views and growing the subscribers only. Yeah. All right. This was, I think, a pretty big piece for Ryan. He was 18, I think it was 18 or 19 years old when he finally hit his 1.5 million subscribers, which is where he hit an internal roadblock. He started to ask himself, am I just going to critique people for my entire life? So when you kind of think about that, and you think about a lot of creators, let's now bring this back to the everyday creator that isn't at this point. I feel like this is a common problem that a lot of people have. They start on the platform in one way, and then they end up somewhere. First off, not really sure how they got there and not really liking the content that they're making, right, guys?
Right. Yeah, I mean, he hit the dream. I feel like he was hit the YouTuber dream of like, I'm trying to grow my channel as much as possible. I hit the 1 million subscribers. And it's funny when I look at it too, because I mean, when we talk with creators and say, what are our goals? What do we want to accomplish in this consultation or working together, whatever that capacity may be? A lot of times it's that number of subscribers or that monetary value. And what I love about this before kind of this pivot for him of this realization of all these things he got and he achieved, but he still wasn't happy. There was still something that was missing for him. And it goes to show that, and this is just one story, but this isn't the only story I've heard of that same idea. Mr. Beast, same idea too. He got all this money, all these views, and realized this is not what I thought it was. So it was interesting that even at that young age, that he pursued something so well, and it was going so well. He was building content that at the time was working, but he realized maybe I don't enjoy this. Maybe this isn't what this is all about. And I think a lot of creators want this lifestyle, but then looking at this kind of shows that even the most successful people struggle with this internal battle.
Yeah, a couple things that stand out to me, I think, are definitely like, because we get asked all the time, am I going to break my channel if I like try something different or pivot or kind of reinvent myself a little bit? So it's just funny to look back and see, totally different types of content. And then when he started taking it seriously, from kind of like the running videos and things like that to the reaction videos is very different. So he kind of like got focused and like leaned into his niche and what he was going to be doing, and then kind of found himself, even though he was growing, like found himself on that hamster wheel of like, I feel like I'm kind of stuck doing this and I don't want to do this the rest of my life. That's kind of another question that we run up against a lot too. Common. I'm burnt out. I'm tired of making these types of videos, or it's not fulfilling for me. What can I do if I've already grown my platform to this size? And so like, spoiler alert, he has pivoted and is still growing like crazy. So to me, it's just cool to see kind of a case study, an example of somebody who has pivoted a few times and kind of really leaned into and focused into, I think really having a clear value proposition, a clear niche and a clear idea and focus around what he wants to be doing, and then going in that direction, even post pivot and still experiencing growth, is a really good example of that.
I feel like the problem that he experienced is a very common one that Blake kind of touched on a little bit here. And this is a problem that's very common that we see a lot. And that is when you make metrics or like subscribers or any views or anything like that, your goal, the very next question always is, once you hit that, what's next? You are very unfulfilled, and it's not sustainable on this platform. You will burn out. And it's inevitable. We've seen it so many times. So if that's kind of been your goal, I encourage you, actually, I'm going to challenge you really to maybe rethink, what does that look like after this episode? Because we got a lot of things to still unpack. I think one of the things that is so fascinating is the internal struggle that he went through. and how it kind of pivoted during a moment in a church service.
Yeah, and the idea of, when he hit this church service, it was at this time, I think he was just between himself figuring, okay, I really am lost with what I'm trying to accomplish. And I think his thought process behind YouTube was create videos for the sake of videos, for the sake of views, for the sake of money. And I think for a lot of people, it's like, okay, what am I really trying to do here? What is my deeper purpose? And in this service, they brought up something called like the 3 different types of work. That being, exploitative work, ethical work, and then redemptive work. So exploitative work was kind of like take what you can get with like the I win, you lose mentality, which is like, I really just want to gain something from you. I want to take profit from you.
I feel like that's something that we see all the time. And when you hear us talk about it, especially with a mistake that a lot of creators make when it comes to sales content, you make it all about yourself and you forget about the person on the other side. That's kind of key to the transaction, right?
Right. Well, this even makes me think of like the YouTube Studio and kind of like the 1 out of 10 ranking system. This paints a picture of like a very black and white YouTube world of like, you either got a 1 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. Like you either had a good video or a bad video. And it's so untrue. And I feel like it almost creates a little bit of like a toxic mindset when it comes to even burnout and like your own motivation to make content. It can be really disheartening if you see that 10 out of 10 where it's kind of like, what is the goal for this video? Like there's so much gray space there. And even if you're trying to improve certain things about your content, that maybe it's, not even looking at views and subscribers gained, but maybe you're trying to work on like better hooks or like avoiding ending language at the end of your video or retention or storytelling and things like that, where, maybe you don't have a 1 out of 10 video, but you can still measure some of the success and maybe it's a win, but the YouTube Studio is not telling you that.
Yeah, I even think of exploitative content that I see on YouTube where it's content at the either the person in the video or the viewer's expense. So like creating prank content, but like actually hurting somebody, like either not say physically, it could be, but emotionally in that video. Like I've seen people do some really outright things for the sake of views that hurts people in the long run. And that's what I view as exploitative content. And really, it's sad because it does work, but it's at people's expense, which is really unethical in my mind.
So how do we make that parallel here to the everyday creator? Because that's not the common thing that we run up against, being completely exploitative. However, I feel like sales content's probably sometimes those mistakes might feel like that, or the common mistake of on the community tab. It's just all about what can I get from you?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with creators where every single video or every single post on the tab is, buy this, go to my website, do this, and
watch this video, watch that,
new video posted now, and it's like we're skipping past. It's that that I win content a mentality of like, I'm going to get this from you, like I want you to do this, I want you to do this. It's never really think about the viewer, but
you actually lose because guess what? They don't click, they don't visit. You are actually the one that's losing when you think about, when you're in that, this is about me. And we see this all the time too, even when it comes to like channel design. And we do consultations with creators all the time. And we're looking at their channel from a zoomed out perspective. And I'm looking at channel art, and the channel art is all about the creator and not about the value that your content or your channel has for me, So, just thinking about it from all those different angles, the about page, another common mistake. We see creators make it sound like a third party language, like a website about page, rather than having a conversation with somebody, that kind of language.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like for the kind of the average everyday creator, like maybe the word exploitative is strong and it's, maybe you're not exploiting your audience, but I think it's really normal to not treat each view as a real human being And so, definitely that mindset of like, how do I just get the most views and the highest numbers? And how do I see the number go up? And, on YouTube, where it's very much, it all comes back to target audience. We say it all the time. How are we reaching our audience and serving them with valuable content, growing the know, like, and trust factor, building a community? Like, these are all things that really lead to winning on the platform. But, first kind of looking through that mindset is what's going to get you there.
Yeah. And I guess coming to that winning concept, the second type of work that they talked about in that service was the ethical. So we've talked about the exploitative, which is, I win, you lose. Ethical being the win-win, lifting everybody up, everyone, sustainable longevity. And this is something I feel like we do shoot for a lot of people for the platform. Yeah. And this is, I'm providing value to receive value. And this is definitely a great type of work to shoot for, I think, just in general, and we do encourage. But I think the one type of work that really stood out to Ryan and is now kind of the catapult for his channel is the idea of redemptive work. And this is something that I feel like a lot of creators don't think about. There's nothing wrong with being ethical and doing the win-win, but he saw this as, oh, this is a lot more fulfilling for me. And what redemptive is, how can I sacrifice so that we win? How can I create something as a gift for people? Creating restoration through your content, not thinking about what you're going to gain from it, but how do I, bless the people around me with whatever I'm trying to create? It's being so selfless that I think that's really what made the difference in what he's doing now.
And I feel like a lot of channels, especially how-to channels, can do this. We do this here on this channel, for instance. But I do see a lot of people doing this incorrectly. We give away like 95% of all the content that you would ever get in talking and working with one of us. The only catch is there's 1,000 videos. So, you have to kind of put it into a process and go through it yourself, which is why people end up coming to work with us. So I feel like a lot of how-to creators, when they approach it with the mindset of, I'm just going to give everybody everything for free, right? Where they end up winning. So they're sacrificing by giving up the secret sauce. But they win in the end because there's just such an overwhelming amount of stuff. People want to part with money for the process and to go through things in a quicker fashion.
Yeah,
right?
that's a fear I've heard from a lot of creators. Is like, I'm too afraid to give too much away because I want them to buy my product. And it's
give it away.
I tell them the same thing about us. We do the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, everything we have, there's no secrets. It's like, you have to go searching for it. But that's the same for me when I went through programs in the past too. It's like I can find the information. I have gone through a lot of it, but having that organized path to follow or roadmap to follow is a lot more valuable.
Yeah, what stands out to me about this too is kind of the like separation from creator and the art that you're creating. I almost feel like from a mental health perspective, it's so healthy to be able to view this thing as like, here's this gift that I just created, or kind of this work that I just made, and now I'm going to just hand it over to my audience. And then past that, like if they want to take the gift or not, like that's out of my hands. This is for them. It's really easy as a creative to get really emotionally invested and tied up in your work, which can be good. Of course, you want to be invested and care about it. But I feel like there's something really healthy, and especially thinking of the long term, to be able to view it that way and just kind of, here's this gift that I'm going to give, and I'm going to have an open hand. And I almost feel like if there are negative comments or things that might affect you less if you're kind of coming at it from that perspective.
Yeah. This is like the first time that Ryan decided to think about the viewer first in relation to his content rather than thinking about the content first. What do they want? How can I benefit them? And that you see that in a lot of his videos now too. I mean, a lot of his content, when you stop and really think about it, has a deeper meaning or deeper lesson or deeper value he's trying to gift to his audience through the experiences that he has. Like the metaverse video where he's living in those VR headsets for, I think it was 24 hours. there's a lot of hidden messages in the background. And the one thing I heard him saying, went back and watched, in the background, there's like a plant in the room, and that's slowly dying over time, or the room gets messier over time. And it's like, there's a lesson to be told through that. It's like, yeah, I want to give you a fun video, but I'm trying to show you a deeper lesson of like the effects of living in a digital world as opposed to reality, and how it can affect you. And even his mindset through the video starts to fade too. It's just the deeper lessons there. There's so much that he tries to pour into his content that's more than just a video, but a deeper why and a gift for his audience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like there's almost like this intangible thing that happens too for the creator, where like as a viewer, you can tell a difference. Like if you watch older content versus newer content, and to be fair, over time, like you grow as a creator and you get more skilled at talking to a camera and being more natural on camera and stuff like that. But I feel like there's something intangible that happens too when you do some of these things and put your audience first and kind of approach it in that way, even with telling a good story and things like that too, where it just translates across the camera and it into the story and into the content, where you can really feel that and kind of connect with the viewer or connect with the creator. You can totally notice that if you kind of go back and compare content, for a lot of channels that we see that happens.
So how would you guys then break this down for the audience listening? So like, how do we put this into a formula, for them to approach their content? Any thoughts?
I feel like this is going to sound like a broken record, but I feel like, the first thing, if you
I know what he's going to say.
Yes. Well, maybe you can fill in the blanks because you know what I'm about to say. I know Blake knows what I'm about to say.
It's going to go back to target audience.
Target audience, yes.
Yep.
And I was going to say value proposition too, but I think, you need to have a real focus from behind the scenes on who exactly you're talking to. Mm-hmm. But I would say too, at the value proposition, like this is very intentional from behind the scenes from Ryan and his team, the whole kind of restorative, or redemptive framework that he's approaching all of this with is planned and intentional behind the scenes. And, he's not even filming himself on camera and talking about like, all right, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ryan and I'm going to do this new video with this restorative, he doesn't even vocalize it, but it bleeds through the content because it is intentional behind the scenes. So the first two things that I would recommend a creator to do, if there is not a focus or intentionality behind those two things, those would be the first two things that I would say. You really get this on paper, write it down, get super focused on these things, because that's going to be like the foundation that everything else is built on.
Yeah, and I'd say that too, because without knowing what your audience is going through or the emotions they're dealing with, how can I create something that's going to help, communicate to alleviate that, or make them feel something in their content through your videos. Like you mentioned, a lot of his content now has a deeper meaning to it, but he knows his audience and what they're dealing with, what they're going through, how he wants them to feel. And without having that clear direction, you're making content that's like throwing spaghetti at the wall, that it could be entertaining, but which is what he was doing in the beginning, but there was no real impact. He was trying to make on a specific person.
So Blake, what I would love for you to do is give the audience a little bit of context here. You talked about the metaverse and really how the deeper lesson was the effect of screens and isolation. Give the audience a couple more examples. Yeah,
for sure. There was one video he did that was in a sensory deprivation tank. So pretty much you're like lying in this like salt pool and you're floating, but you're cut off from all your senses. Yeah, dark. You're completely dark. Yeah. There's no sound. Like you just float there. And like for a lot of people from I heard the experience is, you kind of lose sense of your own world. Like I kind of want to try just to see what it's like, but for him, it's like
next podcast we can do.
Sounds like
we'll all be in the
and it has to be cold.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm out.
It's cold.
You can find somebody else.
But the idea of the video is, and as you watch it, like you can see his mind kind of going throughout the video because you're cut off from all your senses. You're relying on like nothing, but it's putting your mind to the test to see how much your mind can actually handle. And it's interesting watching him go through that as time goes on. He slowly loses grip of reality. He starts at one point, starts laughing for no reason, starts crying for no reason. So he's just kind of showing like what your mind is capable of, but what happens when you put it to the test in uncomfortable scenarios. So there's deeper lessons there. Or even the Penny series, for example, too, which really was the catapult for his channel in a lot of ways. But I think for me, what I pulled out was like anything's possible. You can put yourself, even with lack of resource, can create amazing things, but also, the impact you can have on people with a platform. He did, the whole goal of his Penny series was the idea of feeding America, getting money for charity to help feed people. And that was really the deeper driver behind that. And I think it's inspired a lot of people, not even just him. I think Mr. Beast as well, too. Like with his content also, the fact that he inspires so many kids to want to give money to charity or do something nice for somebody else. So there's these episodes or these videos are entertaining, but they're always trying to teach a deeper lesson or inspire you to be more or do more on this earth.
Yeah, what's interesting about that too with the Penny series is, to me, that feels like a total flip from where he was at before. Feeling kind of convicted. Like, I just feel like I'm criticizing people, and is this going to be my channel? Like, just kind of reacting to people in a negative way. And so the Penny series, what stuck out to me was how positive it was, and how every human that he interacted with was such a like feel good experience. Even the fact that there are these high stakes in the story where maybe he only has such a small limited amount of money that he's trying to save for a plane ticket, but he would like buy McDonald's for the stranger that he met, and they would just have a meal together and things like that too. Was such a cool story of connection and building people up. It was like the polar opposite of where he was not that long ago.
Even the last episode where he was finally delivering that penny to Mr. Beast.
Well, I feel like you guys are getting ahead of yourselves, because we got to break down the Penny series for everybody. So yeah, let's first give the audience a little bit more context to that. But I think that I want to kind of piggyback on something that Sam said. So he was saying something in the story, and there's something to really point out is Ryan is hyper focused on storytelling in his videos. So if you're not implementing storytelling in some form, some fashion in your content, now would be a good time to stretch those muscles a little bit. I know, Blake, you've done a lot of research on the type of storytelling that he actually utilizes. I'd love to know your thoughts and how that actually might be a way or not a way for the audience.
Yeah, the reality is there's a ton of different ways to approach storytelling, and we talk about a few in the podcast, but if you go on Google or YouTube and look up different structures, find one that fits for you. Really, the reality of storytelling is a person, a problem, a climax of them pursuing that issue, and then the transformation at the end of like what happened, how are they different, what went well, what didn't go well. Something similar that we talk about that Ryan uses is something called the hero's journey. So the idea of a character starting somewhere, wanting something more, pursuing that journey, going through the pitfalls, coming back to where they were changed or different because of it. Something Ryan uses called the Dan Harmon circle, which is really kind of the same thing in a lot of ways. And Dan Harmon is a writer who, has worked on TV show called Rick and Morty, Community. There's a movie called Monster House animated movie. But he has a kind of like a nice simplified version of, or not simplified, just a kind of a similar version of what the hero's journey is. But Ryan uses that in every single video. And he mentioned on the podcast how they dig through that and really plan through the content in that aspect. Also as well too, he mentions also, because I feel like for a lot of people, they think, okay, I need this huge transformation moment. It has to be something epic in my videos. And he's done that in his content where it's like, you don't need that. If you force it, it also almost sometimes feels weird. So you're trying to create something that's bigger than what it actually is. I think of a Shrek video. Like there was a transformation moment at the end. Yeah. At the end of the video, there's a transformation moment where he just kind of realized, how fun this actually was, the journey of being there. It wasn't anything crazy. It was a small little quick moment, but it came through and then the video ended. But it doesn't have to be anything nuts. So he's a really great example of how you can utilize that and really just make an entertaining video because of it. So, to really dig into kind of that pivotal moment for Ryan's channel would be the Penny series. And for those of you who don't know what exactly that may be, actually, Sam, do you want to give us a bit of a rundown what that Penny series looks like?
Yeah. So basically, he had this kind of grand story structure where he was starting, I think, in LA, right? Starting in LA with a penny. And so the whole challenge was he was going to deliver a penny to Mr. Beast, the other side of America, in North Carolina. And so yeah, over by Ingrid. And he had to start with this penny, and basically any money earned or anything had to come from the penny. He'd start with a penny, trade it with people for items and things. He would eventually try to like DoorDash and Uber Eats, food to try to earn money, and then use that to buy plane tickets to travel over to North Carolina. So I won't spoil the ending, but that's basically the premise for the whole penny series.
Yeah, I think the one thing to point out is this wasn't just one video. This wasn't just a one-off, like we're doing this all. This went for 30 days, I think it was.
It was like daily vlogging. Yeah, it was almost like came back.
In a time when daily vlogging had kind of disappeared. And I think that was kind of part of a new shift on YouTube where people realized, I really kind of miss vlogging a little bit.
Yeah.
This goes very much to being the redemptive work, right? Mm-hmm. Giving people a chance to have a break and watch something for 30 days in a row.
Yeah. It's interesting enough too. I know from watching after, with a lot of podcasts about him, there were creators who kind of said like, this is probably a bad idea. Like this isn't a great concept. This isn't going to work. Which is really interesting now looking back and seeing the success of it. And for a lot of those people who are like, I can't believe it worked, but like there are reasons why this did work. Mm-hmm. And what those things might be. So what do you think are some things we learned from the Penny series?
Man, I feel like there was so much done from like start to finish, from like the titles, thumbnails to the actual intro hooks, the storytelling, the at the end, leaving it with a bit of a cliffhanger. Like, I feel like we could have a whole another podcast talking about kind of everything that was done well, but maybe just to kind of like start with kind of giving the algorithm what it wants. I think the retention, I mean, we can't see the retention graphs, but it's got to be great with the storytelling. Like, I feel like he did it so well, and kind of having the overarching story for the whole series, kind of leaning into that. There were high stakes. There was the thing called the Great Reset, where again, this was a whole fundraising opportunity. So if anybody gave a certain amount of money, it would reset. Ingrid gave. Did you reset? You didn't reset him. You didn't do the Great Reset.
No.
But I forget what the amount was. If somebody gave a certain amount of money,
$10,000, I think it was.
$10,000, I think it would reset him down to zero. So any money he had earned,
down to a penny.
Yeah, or down to a penny. Yeah, it would be gone. So there were like high stakes. There was tension throughout the entire thing. But I think what was so well done was there was the overarching story, but for each day, he would set up the story. Like, all right, today my goal is to do X, Y, Z, and then there was like these mini stories for each day throughout the entire series.
Yeah, he really rehooked you throughout the entire video too. Mm-hmm. Like, I think of we talk about the idea of open loops, and he tried to do that to keep you. Yes, as one area was finishing, why should we stick around for the next one? And even the idea of, for example, there was a couple times I know a video where he was going to a new destination, another part of the journey to get towards Mr. Beast. But we didn't know where that was. And he kept teasing it and saying, and even the times he would say the word, he would bleep it out with his funny music, his promo branding, right? But it made you want to stick around to say, okay, what is this location? Where are we going? What's happening next? So you're watching the content, but he's constantly seeding in like why you should stick to the end the entire time. And even at the end of the content, teasing, okay, I'm going to bed tonight, but tomorrow I've got this crazy news to tell you guys, and I'll see you then. So there was a reason for me to come back. So the retention carried through into the next day. Even though the video wasn't posted yet, I was already like wanting it.
Yeah, this was not, and we should probably say this was not a small feat. Okay, and yes, he did actually do everything from day 1 to day 30, but he also had his team travel along with him in a van, editing literally between day 1 and day 2.
Craziness.
They worked their tails off. There were only 3 of them to do this, which is so amazing because it just proves that you don't need to have a massive team. He had actually scaled back his team actually prior to doing this, to kind of like resetting himself on his journey. But they broke down, and maybe we'll leave this in the show notes too. When they were on the editing podcast, they broke down the actual edits and how they looked at every single video from a strategic viewpoint as well as a just human viewpoint, which is fascinating in itself. I guarantee you will learn something from that video here on YouTube as well. Like I said, we'll leave that in the show notes. But I think that even though he was so strategic in the structure in itself, and like you guys said, talked about the hooks, that is something to really focus on, because that's something that you can take from this, right? Hooks coming in, bringing somebody into the content, but hooking them out the back door. We talk about it all the time, and he's very, very intentional with that, so that you come back, because it helps, like Sam said, to give the algorithm what it wants. It creates a viewing session. And I know every single person that was watching this series as it was happening, including myself, watched it in real time and watched it from beginning to end every single day. And I think that part of this really goes to the familiarity, right, that we all started to feel. He posted at the exact same time every single day. And I remember some of the comments when it started getting towards the end, because everybody was kind of realizing that we were approaching day 30. And there started to become this little bit of sadness of, we knew there was an end in sight.
Yeah.
And this had become part of our ritual, not just his ritual in just his own primal branding, posting the same day, a lot of things. Good morning, sleepyheads, having his coffee that he would have at McDonald's, his iced coffee every single morning, which I'm sure just Sam is just cringing at right now, being the coffee snob that he is.
Funny enough, I had never really drank McDonald's coffee, but after the Penny series, I had to try it. I had to try a large vanilla iced coffee because it was the primal branding. I connected with it.
You were probably buzzing after that. It's a lot of coffee.
It was so much sugar and so much coffee. I was, yes.
Because he's not healthy, because I can imagine how sugary that coffee was.
Yeah.
I love that. But, everybody was really kind of sad that this was going to go away, because it had become part of our ritual every day. Mm-hmm. Waking up and watching that, or doing it on your lunch break. And that's really good, kind of goes to the gift that he would give everybody. This was a break from our life. And this was just a peek to go on his adventure, right? Do something that's different. Do something that's really creative. Yeah. What were some of the other primal branding type things that you guys picked out from the video?
Yeah, I was just about to say, if you need a masterclass in primal branding, watch the Penny series. It is nuts. I mean, I would say the music, he's got intro music. He's got music during some of the sped up B-roll sections. The ending song, that is absolutely iconic. I would say even the Arial font that he uses for the captions and the thumbnails and things like that is very much primal branding.
The slurping of the coffee.
The slapping of the burrito at Chipotle is primal branding. The Great Reset. I think one of my favorite examples was a few times when he had enough money to buy a bike and would deliver Uber Eats or whatever. And so every time he'd get on his bike and ride out of the shot, it was stupid. He would look at the camera and he would say, "See you later, fart smellers." And then he would ride his bike off out of the frame. And I remember one of the days when I was watching, he didn't do it. He got on his bike and it just rode off out of the frame. And the top comment was, "I feel slightly offended that Ryan didn't call me a fart smeller today." And I'm pretty sure I screenshotted that and put it in our team Slack. And I was like, this is the power of primal branding, because he didn't do it. And it was this kind of loved, expected thing, even though it's super goofy.
So I'm curious, then break that down a little bit for the audience, especially for somebody who doesn't know what primal branding really is.
Yeah. So primal branding is really, we talk about it a lot, but it's really just little intentional things that you weave into your content that create more of this familiarity or this connection for connecting the viewer to the creator. So there's a whole bunch of these different things. Patrick Hanlon wrote a whole book on this, but things like rituals, things that happen regularly from episode to episode, like the music and getting on the bike, that kind of thing.
Good morning, sleepyheads.
Good morning, sleepyheads.
Being in the hammock at night every single time,
yeah,
too.
The ending with the hammock, all of this stuff became rituals.
Wearing the same clothes.
Wearing the same clothes. I think, the icons almost became certain items like the vanilla iced coffee from McDonald's, things where it's like, if he doesn't do it or doesn't have it, it's weird. Like if he were to go to Starbucks or like Dunkin' and get a coffee from somewhere else, it would be weird. It would just be off brand. So it's really intentionally weaving in some of these points of regularity where the viewer can relate to you and connect with you.
Yeah. I feel like he also deliberately really made imperfect videos.
Yeah.
Always. He used to run back for his camera. Like he
I
put
was
it down,
say,
walk away, then run back to my camera.
There were little moments too where, the howdy, like he'd be on his bike or just walking past somebody, and just the little like awkward moments. That's very much just
I felt so awkward in those moments.
Yeah. I think a lot of people.
That's his thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very much his personality. But even moments where somebody, if it was a couple seconds of silence after a shot and he's kind of just awkwardly like looking around where somebody might cut that to make it more like punchy, he would leave those moments in because it was primal branding, and it's funny. It makes the viewer laugh.
There was one point where he was in McDonald's with his phone up, because he films on his phone. First of all, he doesn't use a camera; he uses his iPhone.
Yeah.
The entire thing, and he had it up, and it just kept sliding down, and he kept fixing it. It just kept sliding down. Eventually, he just gave up. You just saw the ceiling. He's like, "I'm not even gonna bother anymore. I'm just gonna talk to you."
But that brings up another good point too. Is here you have a creator that has millions of subscribers. Gets millions of views, and he's shooting this iconic series on a cell phone.
Yeah, since then too, I think, because he used to use a camera for every single video. He had a nice camera, and I think since then it's just been his iPhone. I think one of his newer videos was trying to copy Mr. Beast's video with the last leave the circle, and he had one iPhone on a tripod the entire time that he filmed with. So it just shows you, like, and I would not have known, and neither would I have cared that I would use an iPhone or a camera.
But I think that's the point, is you wouldn't have cared. So for anybody listening that feels like you have to get things perfect, this is the perfect case study that tells you that you don't. He does such a great job of balancing like optimization and personality. And I feel like one of the things that we really need to kind of dive into next is the episodic content. All right. When you think about the series, and it is a series, do you need to watch them all?
I jumped in halfway. I didn't even watch the beginning of it.
Great.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, I didn't know much about Ryan at the time, and I was like, I'm gonna give this a shot. And just I heard about it on a couple podcasts.
2.5 million people didn't.
I jumped in halfway through the series, and I didn't feel like I had to go back and watch the rest. I was able to continue on, which was one thing that I learned about this and try to tell creators when it comes to these episodic content, make it be able to stand alone on its own. Mm-hmm. Make it so that if the video is found, and that was the power of it, because anybody could find a video wherever they were in the series, have full context, and not feel like they're missing out on anything, and be able to move forward with the series from there on out.
It's funny. It was the same for me. I think I missed the first, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 episodes. And so I just jumped in because I was curious. And he does do such a good job of setting up the full story quickly. So I knew the story, I knew the stakes, I knew what was the objective here. And by the end of that video, there were so many connection points too, where I was like, I remember it actually, it was late at night, and I was like, I have to start from the beginning and watch everything I just missed, because I'm so curious because I know the whole story now, but I want to know how he got to where he's at now in this episode. And so, it was so masterfully done, and kind of jumping in halfway through, I knew what was going on, but I also was so curious to start from the beginning and see how did he get here? Like those little pieces of nuance.
Yeah,
I was just going to say,
you go.
like you go.
I was just going to say, like that's one thing. When I work with creators, the struggle of like they want to do episodic content and they feel like things have to be numbered or have to make sense in order. I mean, Ryan did still have a number on the day on the very smallest thumbnail to know which order was in, but people feel like, oh, it has to have this number on it because if they don't get this first one, they'll never get to this one, or if they get to this one, they won't go. Having it be able to stand alone and still make sense without the context before, make sure that the video can succeed on its own. And that will, in turn, hopefully if they watch that, they have full context, they can get the value out of it. If they want to go back, cool, they will. But if I have a video that needs context that I'm not giving of it, if I jumped in halfway through the series and I was watching this video and I could not get any context of what was going on, odds are I might leave the video because there's no point for me to stick around. But he was very intentional of like, I want you to be able to watch this at any point.
I feel like that's the key. So when you're thinking about this, for yourself, for your channel, and you were to approach a series, whether that's around a product, whether it's around, a concept, whatever that thing is, the key takeaway, if we're going to break this down for you, is really that he did a quick recap in every single video. The boys already said that because it's to help new audiences. If you think about just the podcast that we're doing right here, right? I actually just asked them to explain what primal branding was for somebody in case they're new. Now, if you've been listening to our podcasts for the last many years, we talk about primal branding all the time. But if you're brand new to the channel, you don't have that context. So it's important to kind of give those little bits for new audiences, because even though this was a gift to his audience, he was crafting these as discoverable videos. And that's the key, is when you're crafting content to be a discoverable video, you're looking to bring new people to you. That's what makes it discoverable, right? And so when you're crafting that, you're crafting it for a non-subscriber. Okay, now if you're thinking about sales, that's the top of your funnel, and that's what you're doing. So what he did was he had a greeting, and he made it ritualistic so that every single person who's been watching this gets it, right? And then the more you watch, the more you realize that. There was an explainer, there was an update, and then he went straight to the first objective. He quickly got to the content, which if you've heard us talk before with a discoverable video, you want to get to the content right away. But I think one of the most unique and interesting things that he did was the thumbnail strategy to this. Now, Ryan knew that he was going to be on the road for 30 days. Now, being the big mega YouTuber that he is, he knows just how important a title and a thumbnail are to the success of a video. It's not something they created on the road. Thumbnails, and he talked about this in several podcast interviews. Thumbnails were meant to stand alone, okay, because it wasn't necessarily the fact that it was a series, even though it had a number on that. So don't take the number part away. They were shot and planned before the beginning of the series. They were meant to stand alone. Any other thoughts that you guys have on the thumbnails? Because there was some brilliant strategy behind them.
Yeah, I think I was just fascinated the fact that he did it all beforehand. Like he knew,
right?
He didn't know how the days were going to go, and he obviously hadn't filmed anything yet, but he knew what he wanted to accomplish, and he thought about it. When it comes to Ryan's thumbnails, for him, it's also an art form. Like he wants to make sure that it's attention grabbing, that it's interesting, and that it tells that visual story. He follows all the principles we talk about, and he made sure to incorporate that well ahead of time. Same with the way he does with storytelling. Same approach to his thumbnails.
Yeah, what stands out to me is, we work with vlogging channels from time to time too, and it's interesting with kind of like a daily vlog style or something like this where, sometimes Ryan starts the day and has no idea what's going to happen that day. And so it's just kind of the same with vlogging channels that we work with too. I think a lot of times it's like, well, how do I tell a story or set up a story if I don't know what's going to happen today? So, planning ahead of time, titles and thumbnails ahead of time, thinking about what your story is going to be ahead of time can make such a big difference. And I think this is kind of exactly what he did too. He shot all the thumbnails before even embarking on the challenge. So he had an idea and was strategic with what are maybe some of the ways I'm going to try to make money throughout this journey? And so he kind of just had these ideas in his back pocket to try to make this series interesting. Of course, there was the element of surprise and didn't know if things would be successful or not. And, that was still there, the unknown. But having planned these things ahead of time really kind of set him up the best way possible for some of these discoverable things that the algorithm looks for.
Yeah, and some of the patterns that you will notice on his thumbnails specifically are a lot of the same things that we talk about. High contrast. Now, for his niche, which is the spectacle niche, it's really more about, bright colors because it's a youthful audience. But I think one of the biggest takeaways here, first off, major scale when it comes to him.
Huge.
Okay, he is scaled really big. You can see the emotion on his face. You can see his eyes. That's a sign of trust. He's very intentional about where he looks in those as well. But the thumbnails are so simple.
Yes.
There's no confusion whatsoever about what's going on. And they visually tell the story. Extremely limited text. Right?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts at all on other things that he really did?
Yeah, I mean, in general, like with his entire series as a whole, he kept it. And we mentioned like the different ways of making money throughout the series to keep it interesting. Some of which were a flop, which was totally fine, but he didn't know that till it happened. But he had constant stakes and tension builders. Like he talked about the Great Reset, but that was something that, and not even just that, there was other ways too. The Great Reset reset him back to a penny, but he incorporated more when it came to having donating a certain amount. Someone could pick a tattoo for him. Dr. Mike did, right? Not only did this create obstacles and tensions for the entire series as a whole, but it really affected the entire platform. It grabbed the attention of everybody else on the platform. Everyone was able to interact. It wasn't just like I was watching. I could be a part of your story in that context. And those people chose to do it.
And I think that that's part of the thing that makes this so endearing, right? Is so much of the YouTube community felt like they were a part of this. It didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter how big your channel was. I remember even like he did a lot with Sean. I can't think of her name. She was the Olympic gymnast.
Johnson?
Yeah, Johnson. Yeah, and her husband, they were in the videos because he happened to make it into their town. They reached out, they donated, and so everybody just wanted to be a part of it. It really was, I think, a gift for the platform at the time. And I think that's partly why it was so successful. One of the things that we didn't really talk about, I think I might have mentioned it just briefly, was, Ryan had worked so hard to build his channel, and he had worked so hard and really come up with some unique ways, having this big thing of wanting to have a channel bigger than Dr. Phil at a one time and saying that he was his grandfather, and there was this which was brilliant. It was brilliant. But, he actually gained 2.5 million subscribers in 1 month, in 30 days. Nobody had really seen that kind of traction from something that was so creative and unique. I mean, when you really think about it, that percentage that his channel grew was crazy. He hit 10 million subscribers and got his diamond play button. So what are some of the lessons for aspiring YouTubers that you guys kind of took from this?
I think first and foremost, it was, again, like proof that anybody can do this on the platform. I think
totally.
I wouldn't recommend people dropping out of college, but the idea of like the mindset of like, if you stick with it, really pour yourself in. He poured himself hard into his content. Like he really gave it his all and made it his every effort. And again, like I'm talking about Ryan Trahan, Mr. Beast did the exact same thing. He poured his all into this, but that was their passion. But perseverance as well too, like knowing that they did well in a short amount of time, but they were on the platform for a lot longer than when they blew up.
Yeah. And, I'm glad you actually brought up Jimmy because, Mr. Beast, I think it was like 7 years ago, had 10,000 subscribers. He was like, 150 million?
Yeah. Something
And it just grew exponentially, but he had put out an insane amount of content and tried a lot of different things. And I want to say kind of grinded his way there to just try and experiment. It just kind of really, for me, YouTube is a journey. There are very few people that have success overnight. It's so funny because everybody's an overnight success that, that took them 7 years to get there or 6 years to get there or, whatever that is. And I'm not saying that everybody's going to have 1 million subscribers. I'm not saying that everybody's going to have 10 million subscribers. For your niche, 50,000 may be huge, and that's going to be a journey. Yeah. Any other thoughts for you, Sam?
Yeah, I feel like for me, this is a big statement, but I feel like this sort of content is kind of what embodies YouTube. I think it's such a good balance of discoverable content, reaching new people, of course, getting more views and more subscribers and all that stuff that people kind of look forward to, but the building a community. I mean, I was the person showing up, I think it was like 10 a.m. Eastern time every morning was when these videos were coming out. And it was such a part of my routine and something the community could really kind of revolve around. And it's funny to think, there was such a massive growth even in subscribers. I don't remember him asking for subscriptions once.
No, he doesn't.
The entire 30 days. So to me, it just stands out as such a good example of like, this is what the algorithm is looking for. This is kind of what YouTube is looking for creators to kind of, go in this direction and kind of have that balance of like good storytelling, good skill with these things and intentionality, planning these things out ahead of time, but also being relatable and, connecting with your community as well. Yeah,
I feel like the one thing that Ryan is he's very authentic just as a human.
Yeah.
Right. And that just really kind of goes back to it's about humans and not robots. Right. Because when you're thinking about the video and you're thinking about retention, if you're planning your strategy around SEO and keywords, what are you going to do when you're in the video? Because if that's how you're thinking about it, you're probably not going to be very authentic in the video, and you're probably not going to be able to hold the viewer. This is about planning a strategy from front to back, right, guys?
Yeah.
Right. It's about thinking about the titles and the thumbnails before you hit record. It's about having a plan and a strategy, thinking about who you're crafting your content for. We say it all the time. It goes back to target audience. We said it, I think, earlier. This is about putting the viewer first in order to, I guess, hit a grand slam. I would say this was a grand slam.
Oh, yeah.
Blake's like, what's that? I'm from Canada.
How do we translate this to hockey?
I went and saw baseball this weekend, actually. There you go.
Yeah. Anything else that you feel would be totally key for, the audience as a takeaway?
I feel like maybe just to touch on authenticity again, like Ryan Trahan's got a goofy personality and he's very authentic to himself. I guess I would just encourage a creator that authenticity looks different from person to person.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to mean that you have to be like him and try to be super goofy when maybe that's not your personality. So I would maybe lean into when, like, we talk about primal branding and these little goofy things that he does that fits with his personality. And I think that's why it lands so well for his viewers. But I'd maybe just think for yourself, what are some of the things that are authentic to you, and how do we make that primal branding for you and your context and your channel and your target audience? Because it's going to look different from person to person.
It's funny. I think we were chatting today a little bit earlier today about the idea of YouTube being really feeling a lot, really entertainment style these days. And for me, I feel like Ryan feels like you mentioned, like it feels like YouTube, what it's meant to be, which is like entertainment, but being a human, being relatable, having that connection. Like I'll show up and watch Ryan no matter what now because I love him as a personality. And his content's fun. I think it's entertaining. It's for discoverability wise, it nails it. But it embodies of like, I'm not just trying to entertain you. I have this relationship, and he was intentional about that. Again, thinking to another thing he did, and even in the Penny series, the end of every single video he showed a lot of the top donors, people who were giving. He recognized those people. So again, feeling a part of the content the entire time. Like, to me, that's what YouTube is meant to be for me.
Yeah, this is, I think the key takeaways, authenticity, really leaning into primal branding, really honing in on your target audience, using effective titles and thumbnails and the opening video moments of your video, because this is about keeping your audience engaged. And that's really how you got to think about it. What is the gift that you're going to give your audience? What's that redemptive work look like for you? This isn't about just a small town guy who wanted to become a YouTube superstar. Yes, I'm sure he did have those dreams, as a kid, but it changed along the way. He's an entrepreneur now. But for him, it's about being real. It's about being authentic, and it's about truly valuing the audience, which is so key. I don't care who you are, especially if you're in sales. It's about valuing your audience. This is how you can turn a passion into a career. All right. So take this to heart, because whether you're creating content or chasing your dreams, Ryan's journey really shows that when you focus on the right things, success is way more achievable than you think. Every week we like to leave you with a power tip, but this week we have something super special. Really thinking about all the things that you heard today. How do you identify that pattern? So I got homework for you. You're going to click right here, and you're going to watch the beginning of Ryan's new series, and then watch it just as a pure fan. And then I want you to watch it a second time. Yes, you heard that right. But I want you to break down what you're seeing. And then how do you apply that strategy to you? Thanks for listening to another Video Creators Podcast episode. See you next week. Bye.